Welcome to the deep dive. Trying to grasp theology sometimes feels like you're lost in this enormous library, right? Just stacks everywhere.
It definitely can.
But what if there was like an ancient timetable, a preset schedule for the biggest events in history, all laid out in a calendar from centuries back?
Well, that's exactly what our sources are laying out today. We're not just looking at history, we're digging into the really deep theological meaning behind the ancient Jewish festivals.
These aren't just holidays then.
No, not at all. Think of them as precise prophetic markers. The sources actually call them shadows.
Shadows?
Yeah, shadows whose reality, the real substance, is found in the path of the Lord Jesus Christ from his first coming all the way to, well, the end goal, the 1,000-year reign.
Okay, so we've got some pretty detailed source material here. It sounds like it maps specific dates, first month, 14th day, 7th month, 10th day, onto this huge cosmic timeline.
Exactly. It's trying to tap into what you might call messianic time. It sees God's prophetic calendar running through these feasts.
Right. So our mission today.
Our mission is to unpack this very dense, very specific framework for you. We want to show how these festival cycles, spring, summer, autumn, basically lay out a complete spiritual timeline.
A kind of shortcut to understanding this particular view of prophecy and the end times.
Precisely. It's a shortcut to understanding this interpretation of messianic fulfillment and what's still to come. So let's start unpacking that timeline, beginning with the events that sources say have already happened.
Okay, so starting at the foundation, the spring festivals, these all happen in the first month, which is Nisan. We're talking crucifixion, burial, resurrection.
Correct.
And the sources aren't just saying they're connected to the festivals. They're saying these things happen on the actual festival days.
Exactly. As perfect historical fulfillments of those ritual shadows, it's incredibly precise in this view.
What's really striking is the sense of, necessity the sources give this timing. It's like history itself had to bend to fit this divine calendar.
That's the implication. The timing wasn't just convenient. It was, according to this interpretation, the absolute fulfillment of requirements laid out way back in the law. It had to happen then.
Okay, let's start with the big one, Passover, the 14th day of the first month. And this lines up perfectly, you're saying, with the crucifixion.
Perfectly. The material hammers this point home. Christ is our Passover lamb. That's quoting 1 Corinthians.
Right. But why the absolute focus on the 14th day? What's so critical about that specific date?
Well, think back to Exodus. The whole Passover ritual turned on that timing, didn't it? The spotless lamb had to be sacrificed on the 14th day.
Good.
So in this view, Christ's death wasn't just similar to Passover. It was the ultimate Passover, the reality the shadow pointed to. His blood establishing the new covenant. Luke mentions this replaces the lamb's blood on the doorposts.
The protection from judgment.
Exactly. So the argument is, if he died on the 13th or the 15th, well, the whole theological alignment would just fall apart.
Wow, that's incredibly tight, structurally. Let's zoom in a bit, though. The sources mention Psalm 22, almost like it's a script written beforehand.
It's treated almost exactly like that, like predictive writing 1,000 years early. Think about the details in that song.
The cry of abandonment, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's in Matthew 2.
Right. Directly linked here to the experience of divine justice. But look closer at the physical descriptions highlighted from the psalm.
Okay.
Being mocked, reviled, feeling poured out like water, bones out of joint, the piercing of hands and feet, and critically, the gambling for his clothes. It's all there in Psalm 22.
So the argument is, this ancient psalm basically proves the method and the suffering were preordained to make sure it fit the sacrificial model perfectly.
That's precisely the argument. The death had to be public, agonizing, and timed exactly to the Passover ritual. It serves as the ultimate sign that the sin debt was paid, kicking off this new covenant through his blood.
Okay, so Passover is the 14th. Then immediately, the 15th day, we hit the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And this is when the sources place the burial.
Correct, right after the sacrifice.
Why the immediate shift? Sacrifice, then? Purification.
Because unleavened bread is all about purification. Leaven yeast, it's the scriptural symbol for sin, corruption, malice.
Right, get rid of the old leaven.
Exactly. Exodus mandates removing it so the people could become a new lump, as Paul puts it in 1 Corinthians. So since the true Passover lamb, Christ, had just been sacrificed, the next step had to be immediate, total purification from sin's remnants.
So his time in the tomb isn't just biology. It's a theological necessity, a symbol of the sinless lamb being totally separate from corruption.
That's the interpretation, yes. And look how the sources use the practical details. John notes they put Jesus in the tomb quickly because it was preparation day, right before the Sabbath feast. They see that rush as divine providence, making sure the burial happened during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It fits the calendar.
Okay, and what about this idea of rest?
Yes.
Psalm 23 comes up here.
Yes, it's a beautiful connection they make. This period of stillness, separation in the tomb, it's linked to resting in the shadow of death, but still guided by the shepherd.
From Psalm 23, yea, though I walk through the valley.
Exactly. So it's not just empty waiting, it's a transition. Even in death, the shepherd is there, guiding. It signifies the purification work is done and preparations being made for what's next. It's like the Sabbath rest after the ultimate work of sacrifice.
Which brings us to the climax of this spring cycle, first fruits. This festival happens the day after the Sabbath that follows Passover, and this marks the resurrection.
Yes, and the timing here for this framework is absolutely non-negotiable. It's crucial.
Why so crucial?
Because it positions Christ not just as resurrected, but as the guarantee of resurrection for everyone who believes. Paul calls him the first fruit of those who sleep in 1 Corinthians 15.
Like the first sample of a harvest.
Exactly. A farmer sees that first ripe sheaf and knows the whole field is coming. Christ rising as the first fruit guarantees the rest of the harvest believers will follow.
And the ritual itself involved waving a sheaf.
Yes, the physical ritual is key here. On that specific day, the day after the Sabbath, the priest would literally wave the first sheaf of the barley harvest. That's the early grain before the Lord. It's right there in Leviticus.
So the ritual is the shadow.
And Christ, rising on that exact day, is the reality. He presents himself to the Father as the first bit of redeemed humanity, risen from death. It's the promise that the full harvest is secured.
So if he hadn't risen on first fruits,
According to the sources, the whole theological structure collapses. The historical events, death, burial, resurrection, they argue, had to perfectly match the timing of these spring feasts. It sets the foundation for everything else.
right, so we've established that historical foundation with the spring festivals. Now, we kind of jump across this long period. It's basically our current era.
It's time we're in now. Exactly. And it's defined as the time of the ongoing spiritual harvest. This period connects the resurrection to the next major festival date, the Feast of Weeks, or Pentecost.
And the connection is math, a 50-day countdown, tag A, counting the 50 days, the Feast of Weeks, Pentecost.
It's purely based on the count, yes.
Yeah.
You start from the day the sheaf was waved at first fruits. That's Resurrection Day in this model.
Okay.
You count 7 full Sabbaths, which is 49 days, and the day after that 7th Sabbath is the 50th day. That's the Feast of Weeks. Leviticus lays out the count.
Also known as Pentecost, right? Pente meaning 50.
Correct. Pentecost.
Now, you mentioned the barley harvest for first fruits. This Feast of Weeks involves a different grain.
Yes, and this agricultural detail is really important in this interpretation. First fruits was the barley, the early harvest. The Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, marks the presentation of the wheat harvest. That's the later main grain harvest.
Okay, barley then wheat. Genesis mentions the wheat harvest specifically.
It does. So the barley, first fruits, represents Christ's resurrection, the absolute first breakthrough. The wheat represents the bigger subsequent harvest of souls gathered throughout this long interval we're in, from that first Pentecost right up until the end of the age. This difference is key to how the sources categorize the redeemed. Tag B, the early rain and latter rain analogy.
Okay, so this long interval, this harvest time, it's powered by the Holy Spirit. And the sources use an analogy here, early rain and latter rain. Like you need both for a good harvest in that part of the world.
Exactly. They draw that from promises like the one in Deuteronomy about God sending rain in its season.
But why split the harvest or the rain into two? Why the need for early and latter?
Well, the need comes from how the sources read the end times prophecies, especially in Revelation. They see the harvest as long, but believe the Spirit's work culminates in gathering 2 distinct groups.
Okay, let's break that down. The early rain group, who are they?
They interpret the early rain as referring to those who receive the first fruits of the Spirit. This is broadly the saints, the main body of believers throughout history. Paul talks about this in Romans.
So like the spiritual barley harvest, the main crop over time?
You could think of it like that, yes. The vast majority who are resurrected when the Lord returns. But then the sources identify a very specific final group tied to the latter rain.
And this group is called?
They are specifically called the first fruits, but not Christ this time. They're the first fruits of the final harvest. This group is identified as the 144,000 mentioned in Revelation.
Oh, okay. That's a very specific interpretation. So what makes the 144,000 the spiritual wheat in this analogy different from the general saints.
Revelation 14 describes them as redeemed from among humanity, uniquely without defilement, and they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They're seen as this final, perfected group, sealed right at the end during the last period of judgment.
So the outpouring of the Spirit at Pentecost, the Feast of Weeks, that was like the down payment.
Exactly. The promise of the Spirit, those rivers of living water Jesus talked about in John, that ensures this final, complete harvest, the latter rain, happens just before the Lord returns. It culminates in sealing these final first fruits.
Got it. So this whole age we're living in has this specific purpose. It's the long harvest season, waiting for that final latter rain, and the sealing of the 144,000. And once that's done, the focus shifts dramatically.
Yes, precisely. Now we move from history and the current interval into pure prophecy, according to this framework. The 3 autumn festivals, trumpets, atonement, and tabernacles, these point entirely forward, towards the Lord's return, the judgment, the setting up of the kingdom.
It's where it gets really intense end time stuff.
Yes. The sources treat these autumn feasts as the blueprint for the final act. The eschatological clock really starts ticking here. ###A, the Feast of Trumpets, 7th month, 1st day.
Okay, the prophetic cycle kicks off on the first day of the 7th month, the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah. I know it's a memorial, blowing the shofar, a holy gathering.
Yeah.
Leviticus mentions it.
Right. But in this interpretation, the Feast of Trumpets isn't a single event itself. It represents the lead up to the main event.
The prelude.
Exactly. The sources interpret this festival period as corresponding to the sounding of the first 6 trumpets in the book of Revelation.
Wow. Okay, so trumpets 1 through 6.
Yes. It signifies that whole period of escalating judgments, warnings, the disasters Revelation describes, all happening before the Lord actually returns in person.
So when Revelation talks about, the ecological disasters, the warfare, the woes, that's all happening prophetically during this Feast of Trumpets period. Kind of like warning blasts.
That's exactly how they see it. Final warnings, giving humanity one last chance to pay attention before the ultimate judgment falls. They're like heralds announcing the final decision time is almost here.
Okay, then 9 days later, the 10th day in the 7th month, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. Traditionally, the most solemn day, right? Fasting, sacrifices, dealing with the nation's sin for the year. Leviticus 23 again.
The most solemn day, yes.
But how does this one day get expanded into like a whole era of cosmic judgment in this interpretation?
Yeah, it's a huge expansion. The sources see this Day of Atonement prophetically as a prolonged period. It starts with the ultimate signal,
That is
the 7th trumpet, and this Day of Atonement period lasts all the way until Satan is bound in the abyss. It covers the entire judgment process. It's the time when everything gets sorted out, reconciliation for the saved, judgment for the lost. It's the final accounting.
the 7th trumpet. That's the trigger.
Yeah.
And whoa, what a trigger. Paul in 1 Corinthians says at the last trumpet, the dead are raised imperishable. The living are changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. That's instantaneous, massive change.
It is. It's the instant culmination of the harvest we talked about. And that same trumpet blast, according to Revelation 11, marks the end of the 3rd woe and brings that huge declaration. The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ.
So one trumpet sound does all that. Resurrection, transformation, and the declaration of Christ's worldwide rule.
All at once. And critically, the sources stress that the first resurrection, the resurrection of the righteous, happens immediately following the 7th trumpet. Paul mentions this in 1 Thessalonians 2.
Okay, so that resurrection is the big dividing line. It kicks off the judgment phase. The Day of Atonement as a period of judgment begins then.
Absolutely. Raising the righteous separates them out, and that allows the final cleansing process, the cosmic atonement, to really begin, leading straight into the pouring out of God's final wrath. It's an instant shift. From the warning trumpets 1 to 6 to the ultimate judgment era, all kicked off by that 7th trumpet.
Okay, then just 5 days after Atonement starts, on the 15th day of the 7th month, we get the Feast of Tabernacles. Sushukai. This one celebrated the final harvest, the ingathering, and people lived in temporary shelters, remembering the wilderness journey, right?
Oh, yeah.
Leviticus 23 again.
That's the tradition, yes, dwelling in booths or tabernacles.
And prophetically, this points to
The 1,000-year reign, the Millennium. It's seen as the ultimate harvest festival, the ultimate ingathering, the time of finally dwelling securely with God. The temporary shelters of the past point to the permanent dwelling in the kingdom.
and who lives and reigns in this kingdom.
It's specifically those who took part in the first resurrection, the ones raised or changed at the 7th trumpet. Revelation 20 calls them blessed and holy.
And it says they'll be priests and rule with Christ for 1,000 years.
Exactly. That reign is the culmination of the whole sacred calendar cycle, establishing peace, justice, where sin used to rule.
It sounds like the ultimate fulfillment, like Isaiah 65 talks about.
A new reality, yes, where God creates a new heaven and a new earth, and the former things, all the struggle, the pain, the whole lead up to this atonement are completely forgotten. They won't even come into mind. This is seen as the necessary result of a completely finished, totally validated atonement.
Okay, now we need to really take the deep dive here. This is probably the most intricate part of this whole interpretation. Mapping the festivals to the timeline is one thing.
But understanding how the ancient temple service for the Day of Atonement laid out in Leviticus 16 provides the actual mechanics for the end times judgment sequence in Revelation. That's where this framework gets incredibly specific.
So we need to picture the high priest's actions on Yom Kippur, but see them mirrored by Christ's actions in heaven leading up to the second coming. That sounds complex.
It is. It requires synchronizing those two narratives perfectly. Hashtag A. The start of the cosmic atonement.
So where does this cosmic atonement process actually kick off in Revelation, according to the sources?
It doesn't start with the trumpet, surprisingly. It starts earlier, with the Lamb breaking the seventh seal. That's Revelation 8.1.
The seventh seal
No.
that leads to silence in heaven.
Exactly, half an hour of silence. And that silence immediately precedes the incense ritual, which is key.
Okay, connect that to the temple. On the Day of Atonement, the high priest couldn't just barge into the Holy of Holies.
No way. First, he had to bring incense. He'd take a censer full of burning coals from the altar, add sweet incense, and the smoke had to create a cloud covering the mercy seat before he went in. Leviticus 16 is clear on that. It was protection from God's direct presence.
Ah, right. So how does that map to Revelation?
It maps directly to Revelation 8, verses 3 and 4. There's an angel at the golden altar before the throne, offering up many incense, which are identified as the prayers of the saints. This act, this offering of incense, is interpreted as the moment the heavenly work of atonement actually begins.
And the time it takes for this incense cloud to form that corresponds to the early judgments.
That's the interpretation. The sources equate this preparatory phase, the time the heavenly Holy of Holies is being covered by this incense cloud, with the sounding of the first 6 trumpets.
So the silence, then the first 6 trumpets blowing on earth, while Christ, as high priest, is doing this initial incense ritual in heaven.
Precisely. It's the period when intercession is kind of winding down right before the full force of judgment begins. Hashtag B, the 7th trumpet and the unveiling.
Okay, so if the first 6 trumpets happen while the incense is doing its work, then the 7th trumpet must mean that stage is over, the incense has filled the place. Time for the unveiling.
Exactly. It's the absolute climax when the heavenly throne is fully covered by the incense cloud. Boom, the 7th trumpet sounds. And at that exact moment, the sources say the actual curtain, the veil blocking the Holy of Holies in the heavenly temple, is thrown open. Revelation 11.15.
But the sources add something really mind-bending here. It's not just about a trumpet or a curtain. It's about the proving of the commandment. What does that mean? Why does God's law need cosmic validation right then?
Okay, yeah, this is where the interpretation gets really unique. The argument is that Lucifer's rebellion and then the fall of man basically threw a massive question mark into the universe. Is God's law actually good? Is it just? Is it wise? Is it really necessary for happiness? And the sources suggest that up until this moment, the 7th trumpet, even the loyal angels, the principalities and powers Paul talks about in Ephesians, the ones Peter says long to look into these things, even they might have had lingering questions. Maybe not full doubt, but an incomplete grasp of God's wisdom in allowing sin and setting up this whole redemption plan.
Wait, are you saying that finishing the atonement depends, partly, on settling a debate among the angels? They need to be convinced God is right.
That is the interpretation.
Yeah.
That the full mystery of God's plan, finally revealed at this climax, wipes out any remaining shadow of a doubt for all celestial beings. They see the whole picture, redemption, judgment, the law finally supreme, and it confirms their absolute loyalty. It perfects their free will, in a sense.
So the atonement isn't just cosmically legal, it's cosmically persuasive. It has to satisfy everyone that God's way was right all along.
Yes. The wisdom of God is universally validated. And because the law is upheld and shown to be perfect, the atonement is considered a cosmic success.
That really changes the perspective on the end times. It's not just about judging humans, but about resolving that original challenge to God's authority and wisdom. And once that cosmic validation happens, then the sanctuary can open wide. Revelation 11.19 says the temple opens, the Ark of the Covenant is visible, and definitive judgment can proceed.
Precisely. The stage is fully set. Hashtag, tag, hashtag, see the 7 plagues and heavenly cleansing. Absolutely. Cosmic validation complete. Now, the final cleansing starts. Christ, as high priest, immediately begins cleansing the actual Holy of Holies and the holy place in heaven, removing the records of sin. It's the ultimate purification of the heavenly sanctuary itself.
And while that's happening in heaven, judgment unfolds on earth.
Simultaneously, yes. The sources map this heavenly cleansing period directly onto the pouring out of the 7 last plagues on earth. That's Revelation 15 and 16. These plagues are God's final, undiluted wrath on the unrepentant.
And there's a rule from Leviticus about this moment, about being alone.
Yes, a powerful parallel. Leviticus 16.100 months strictly forbids anyone from being inside the earthly tabernacle while the high priest is inside making atonement.
Okay.
The sources apply that cosmically. While Jesus is in the heavenly sanctuary finishing this final cleansing, no one else is involved. Humanity below is experiencing the plagues, the final judgments, totally separated, while the high priest completes his work above. The 7 bowls of wrath are poured out during this time of absolute divine focus.
Wow. Isolated judgment below, isolated cleansing above. How do we know when the heavenly part is finished?
It concludes precisely when the 7th plague is poured out into the air. At that exact moment, Revelation 16.1 says, a loud voice comes from the throne inside the temple, the now cleansed sanctuary, declaring, "It is done."
It is done. That signals the end of the heavenly cleansing phase of atonement. Hashtag decleansing Hades and binding Satan.
It is done. But wait, the Day of Atonement ritual wasn't quite finished yet, was it? The high priest cleansed the sanctuary, represented the people, but he also had to cleanse the altar and then deal with that second goat, the scapegoat.
Right. The altar and the scapegoat. Where do those fit into the prophetic timeline?
Okay, according to the sources, those final steps require Jesus to return to earth. After cleansing the heavenly sanctuary, he must then cleanse the altar, which they interpret as representing Hades or the grave, the place of death.
How does he cleanse Hades?
By returning in glory, Revelation 19 describes his return and physically destroying the wicked, the unrepentant sinners still on earth. Slaying the perpetrators of sin is seen as the act that atones for the corruption they brought, effectively cleansing the altar of the earth and the realm of death itself.
So the fiery judgment at the second coming is the cleansing of the altar Hades.
Yeah.
Okay, what's left?
Just one thing, dealing with the source of the problem, binding Satan. And the sources link this directly to that second goat from Leviticus 16.
The scapegoat, Azazel.
Exactly, Azazel.
Now, hang on. Does the New Testament actually call Satan Azazel, or is this purely based on fitting the Leviticus pattern? That seems like a big interpretive leap.
That's a really important question. And you're right, the New Testament doesn't explicitly make that identification. The source material argues this is an interpretive necessity driven by the Levitical blueprint.
Okay, explain the logic.
In Leviticus 16, you have 2 goats. One goat, the Lord's goat, is sacrificed. Its blood is used for atonement inside the sanctuary.
Right.
The other goat, Azazel's goat, isn't killed. The high priest confesses the sins of Israel over its head, and then it's led alive into the wilderness, a desolate place, carrying the sins away, never to return.
Okay, so the parallel is?
Christ, the Lord's goat, was sacrificed. His blood made atonement. Satan, identified as Azazel, must bear the ultimate responsibility for the sins he tempted people into, and he must be confined alive in a desolate place, the abyss mentioned in Revelation 20.
Ah, I see the symmetry they're drawing. Cleanse the sanctuary with blood, cleanse the earth by judging the wicked, then banish the source of sin.
Precisely. Binding Satan into the abyss is the absolute final step of the cosmic Day of Atonement. Once that's done, debt paid, sanctuary cleansed, wicked judged, instigator confined, now the calendar can finally move to the great celebration.
And we circle back to the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot. But now we understand it as the ultimate result, the grand finale of that incredibly detailed atonement process we just walked through.
Yes. The 1,000-year reign, the Millennium, can only begin after every single requirement of that cosmic atonement is met. Heavenly cleansing done, earthly judgment complete, Satan locked away. Only then can God truly tabernacle or dwell securely with his people.
And the ones ruling during this time.
Yeah.
Specifically those from the first resurrection, right?
That's what the sources emphasize, based on Revelation 20. They have a special role. Priests of God and Christ ruling with Christ for that 1,000 years. It's the fulfillment of the ingathering. The saved are gathered together to reign in peace and justice.
What really defines this kingdom? What makes it the ultimate tabernacles?
The sources stress the absolute security, the peace. It's the environment needed for the final step, God creating the new heaven and new earth Isaiah promised. The millennium is seen as this period of restoration, preparing everything for eternity. And crucially, during this time, the memory of all the conflict, the doubt, the suffering, the whole messy history of sin and redemption just fades away. It won't even come into mind.
Wow.
It's about establishing absolute, untroubled purity. It completes the cycle that started way back with that first Passover lamb.
From sacrifice all the way to sovereignty. An entire theological loop. #tag conclusion and key takeaways.
So let's just quickly recap the core claims we've explored in this deep dive. The sources paint this picture of the Jewish festivals acting like a two-part cosmic drama. Act 1, the spring feasts, Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits already fulfilled historically in Christ's first coming.
Done and dusted.
Right, Act 2. The autumn feast, trumpets, atonement, tabernacles, laying out the precise prophetic sequence for the future.
And those key links are crystal clear in this view. Cross equals Passover. Resurrection equals first fruits. Then the sequence. Trumpets as the warning prelude, leading into this extended atonement period of judgment, which finally culminates in tabernacles, the 1,000-year kingdom.
Exactly. But what's really, I think, mind-blowing is the sheer scale of the atonement in this interpretation. It's not just about reconciling humans to God.
No, it's way bigger.
It involves cleansing the heavenly temple, executing judgment on earth, and validating God's wisdom and justice throughout the entire cosmos, even in the heavenly courts. It's like a universal legal case that has to satisfy justice on every conceivable level.
And that's where this interpretation really makes its unique mark, isn't it? This idea that finishing the atonement isn't just about us, but about satisfying the angels, resolving their questions, perfecting their free will by showing them the whole incredible plan.
That's the most provocative element, I agree. It forces you to think about the implications.
So here's something for you, the listener, to really chew on. If the whole divine plan hinges on this ultimate cosmic validation, if God's law has to be proven right not just to us, but to every angel, what does that tell us about how serious the original rebellion was? About the true complexity of free will, both ours and theirs?
And maybe more importantly, what kind of deep foundational security does that offer us? Knowing that eternal allegiance, God's rightness, is finally settled universally, irrevocably. That's the knowledge you're left with, long after you've mapped the timeline.
A really intricate, tightly woven, and definitely thought-provoking take on the sacred timeline. Thanks for guiding us through all that complexity.
My pleasure. It's fascinating material.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.